This is Mrs. Zappia with Lesson 5, Writing and Solving Linear Equations. Student outcomes for this lesson. Students apply knowledge of geometry to writing and solving linear equations. The lesson begins on page 33 of your book. The essential question is, when is it more efficient to write and solve an equation versus guess and check? Example 1. One angle is 5 less than 3 times the size of another angle. Together, they have a sum of 143 degrees. What is the measure of each angle? What do we need to do first to solve this problem? We need to define our variable. Let's let x be the first angle in degrees. Let x equal the first angle. If x is the measure of the first angle, how do you represent the measure of the second angle? 5 less than 3 times the size. So if x equals our first angle, then our second angle is 3 times x minus 5. That's 5 less than 3 times the size of the angle. So the equation that represents the situation, it says together they have a sum of 143 degrees, meaning the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 143 degrees. Angle 1 is represented by the variable x. The second angle is represented by 3x minus 5. And together they have a sum of 143 degrees. We'll solve for x and then determine the measure of each angle. Let's simplify. We have x plus 3x minus 5 equals 143. Factoring out the x, that gives us 1 plus 3 minus 5 equals 143. This gives us 4x. So we have 4x minus 5 equals 143. Some of you may have done this step mentally and gone straight to this step, and that's fine. Next, we'll undo the subtraction with addition. Add 5 to both sides of the equation. This is the addition property of equality. 143 plus 5 is 148. This is a zero pair, which leaves us with 4x on the left side of the equation. Use the division property of equality and divide both sides by the coefficient. A number divided by itself is 1. 148 divided by 4 is 37. The measure of the first angle is 37 degrees. The measure of angle 1 equals 37 degrees because that is the value of x, and x represented the first angle. The measure of angle 2, recall that it is 3 times x minus 5. So that's 3 times 37, take away 5. The measure of angle 2 simplifies to 106 degrees. So not only did we have to solve for x, but we also had to find the measure of the second angle. In the next section, it says, using either method, solve the equation. Verify that the measures of the angles are the same as before. Here is another method to solve this problem. Could we have defined x to be the measure of the second angle? If so, what, if anything, would change? If we let x be the measure of the second angle, then the equation would change, but the answer for the measure of the angles should remain the same. Let's say that x is the measure of the second angle. Then how would we write the measure of the first angle? If the measure of the second angle, let's rewrite that. If the measure of angle 2 was equal to x, then the measure of angle 1 would need to be written in a different way. It would be 5 more than the angle divided by 3. The equation that represents this situation then is the second angle being x and the first angle being x plus 5 divided by 3. Together, they have a sum of 143 degrees. So these two equations represent the same two angles. So let's solve this one just to verify that you would get the same answers for the angles. Here, we would need to add together to simplify on the left side of the equation. Remember that you need common denominators to add. The common denominator here, first write x as a fraction. It would be x over 1. Then the common denominator would be 3. So you would need to multiply this fraction by 3 over 3. That gives us 3x over 3 plus x plus 5 over 3. Now we'll simplify. Since they have the same denominator, add the numerators. So that gives us 3x plus x plus 5 all over 3 equals 143. Combine your like terms. 3x plus x is 4x. 4x plus 5 all over 3 equals 143. Multiply both sides of the equation by 3. That gives us 4x plus 5 is equal to 9, 12, 229. Rather, that would be 429. Next, subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. That leaves us with 4x on the left and 424 on the right. Next, divide by the coefficient. That gives us a value of x of 106. The value of x, that would be the measure of angle 2, equals 106 degrees. Then the measure of angle 1 is 106 plus 5 divided by 3. 106 plus 5 is 111. 111 divided by 3 is 37. And so then we have the measure of angle 1 equals 37 degrees. Did we get the same answer? We did, 106 degrees and 37 degrees. The point is, you can let x equal one or the other angle, but you do have to be careful to write the equation in the correct manner. Example 2. Given a right triangle, find the measure of angles if one angle is 10 more than 4 times the other angle and the third angle is a right angle. Let's draw a diagram of what this might look like. We know that it is a right triangle. And in a right triangle, one of the angles is 90 degrees. One angle is 10 more than 4 times the other. How do you write 10 more than? You add 10. 10 more than what? 4 times the other angle. So we need to let one of the angles equal x. And then 4 more than that would be 4x. So one of the angles will be x, and the other one will be 4x plus 10. Pause the video and copy what we have so far, and then see if you can write an equation and solve it for x, and then find the measure of the second angle. So we know that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 will equal the sum of a triangle is 180 degrees. The measure of angle 1, let's let that be 90. So this will be angle 1. Angle 2 will be x. And angle 3 is 4x plus 10. And that all has a sum of 180. Next, combine like terms. We have 90 plus 10 plus x plus 4x equals 180. I used the commutative property to rearrange and group like terms. So I have 90 plus 10 is 100, x plus 4x is 5x, and 180. Next, subtract 100 from both sides of the equation. This is the addition property of equality. This equals 0. Bring down the 5x equals 80. Divide by the coefficient. This is the division property of equality. That will give us the value of x. The value of x is 16. That means the measure of angle 2 equals 16 degrees. The measure of angle 3 is 4 times 16 degrees plus 10. 4 times 16 is 64, plus 10 is 74. Now, can you think of a way to check and see if your solution is correct? We know that the three angles together have a sum of 180. So if we add together 90 plus 16 plus 74, this should equal 180. And it does. We're going on to example 3. A pair of alternate interior angles are described as follows. Just to refresh your memory on alternate interior angles, we know that alternate interior angles on parallel lines are congruent. Alternate interior angles might be these two. One angle measure is 14 more than half a number. The other angle measure is 6 less than half that number. Are the angles congruent? We're going to assume that the angles are congruent. In other words, that the lines that they are on are parallel. If they're congruent, we know that they are equal in measure. Write an expression that describes the angles. It says that one angle is 14 more than half a number. How do you write 14 more than? You add 14. 14 more than what? Half a number. How do you write half a number? 1/2 x. So we'll let x equal the number. The other angle is 6 less than half the number. How do you write 6 less than? You take 6 away. Away from what? Half the number. So we're going to take 6 away from half the number. Assuming that these are congruent, we can write an equation. Now let's solve for the variable x. I'm going to subtract 14 from each side of the equation. That's going to give me 1/2 x on the left and 1/2 x minus 20 on the right. Next, I'm going to subtract 1/2 x from both sides of the equation. On the left, that gives me negative 20. This is a zero pair. On the right, this is also a zero pair. Is it true that 0 equals negative 20? No, 0 does not equal negative 20. Are the angles congruent? The answer is no. The left does not equal the right, so they are not congruent. Let's skip ahead to the lesson summary. In this lesson, we have learned to write and solve equations relating to geometry and angles. We reviewed the triangle sum theorem. 3 angles add to 180 degrees. A right angle is 90 degrees. Complementary angles add to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles add to 180 degrees. And congruent means equal to.